Elephants are used in different religious festivals. What are your thoughts on that?
And I think a disaster is waiting to happen.
I have had farmers say if they yell at elephants with a certain tone voice, they stop and walk away.
What is our responsibility as the average human being? Hi, everyone, to all of you. We are on a Spa Ceylon podcast and we've got a very interesting one. As you know, Spa Ceylon is committed to conservation across the board, and something that's very, very close to our heart is elephant conservation. We've been working with the WNPS for about 7 to 8 years on this. We've been working with other organizations pretty much from our inception, and we're very happy to have with us two individuals who've been working around elephant conservation for a long time, starting with Dr. Tempe, who is a foremost elephant expert from around the world, really. She's been very immersed in conservation, living in Botswana for close to 13 years and really working hard at human-elephant conflict and the conservation of elephants and drawing attention to it. We also have Jehan, who is the immediate past president of the WNPS, the Wildlife and Nature Protection Society, the second oldest nature protection society in the world. Very happy to have both of you here.
Thank you. Thank
you
you so
Shalin.
much. It's
Thank
an
you
honor.
much.
Dr. Tempe, I'll start with you, keeping things fairly informal and trying to get a little more information on yourself.
Sure.
Why elephants?
Oh my goodness. That is a loaded question. I mean, obviously elephants are incredibly sort of revered around the world. I think lots of people have a big appreciation and fascination for them. So I think I was always, honestly, initially documentaries. As a kid watching documentaries, I was always drawn to elephant ones. Going into my scientific career, I realized you actually focus on an elephant because we often call them iconic umbrella species. So when you look after an elephant, you're actually looking after all the other animals within that same ecosystem. So it's almost like an economical animal to focus on for conservation.
Oh, wow. So elephants have pretty much taken you around the world. And then you have been in Botswana for the last 13. Why Botswana?
I did my PhD in Botswana on human-elephant coexistence. Botswana is incredibly special and incredibly significant for elephants because we have the largest concentration of elephants in the world. We're sitting at around 130,000 elephants of what is estimated in Africa about 410,000. So Botswana really does hold a very significant global proportion of elephants. And with that, we have quite a lot of conflict and a lot of issues. So it seemed like the best place to be focusing my efforts.
Fantastic. WNPS, you guys are doing some amazing work and it's all on a volunteer basis and so much passion, so much hard work across the board, not just on elephants, but on habitat, on other species as well. Just a little bit about the WNPS and the work you guys are doing.
Yeah, thanks, Shalin, and thanks for the opportunity. So WNPS, as you said, is one of the oldest conservation organizations in the world. We are celebrating 130 years this year. As you quite rightly said, we work in different spheres of conservation. At the moment, we're talking about elephants, and if you ask me why elephants, I'm not a scientist, and I got involved in WNPS at a very small age as a member through my dad, who made me a member. Wildlife has been a passion for me just because growing up, birthday parties, we used to watch the Born Free movies. And, that's how I got to like wildlife. To be honest, today I'm going to tell you something. It was initially leopards that I liked.
Oh
and
my
that's
gosh.
what I was, concentrating on as a photographer. But I'm glad I moved things into a different sphere. And why elephants is pretty much because of what's happening in our country today. Last year, we killed 473 elephants. Maybe 50% of that was due to conflict, or 60% due to conflict. It's a sad plight. And as Tempe said, we need elephants for the country, for its ecosystems, for the biodiversity it does, and for everything that it creates for the other animals as an iconic species. So for me, that's going to be the rest of my life to look after as what we can do for elephants in Sri Lanka.
Just taking from that statistic you gave, I found it gut-wrenching and mind-blowing. 473 elephants in a year. That's more than one a day in this little country of ours. Yes, we have the highest density of Asian elephants, if I'm correct.
Second highest, yes.
Second highest, largest density of Asian elephants. But to be losing more than one elephant a day, and mainly due to the human-elephant conflict. There are deaths happening in Botswana as well, but not as the death rate, I believe, in Sri Lanka is much higher as a percentage. Why so many deaths? What can we do as administrators and governments? And what can we do as people to remedy this in some way?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really important to understand the cause of the conflict to try and come up with and implement any kind of remedy. And I think a lot of it is obviously globally increase human population and urban expansion and development. And it's, we can't stop that. That's going to keep happening. But I think it's really important to support the communities and really understand what the communities on the ground that are the ones dealing with elephants on a day-to-day basis. And as soon as you can kind of build up a good relationship there and integrate yourself there to really understand the issues, then you can try and start implementing mitigations or tools to actually help empower people. And that's where I think WNPS is really extraordinary, because they have such a high presence throughout the whole country and literally recruit people from those different areas to really understand and be on the ground as much as possible. But I think there's no one solution. That's the thing. You've got to use a combination of solutions. It can be through education campaigns, scientific mitigation tools, and you need to have that government buy-in support and work in collaboration to solve it. So it is a big task, it is a big job, but it is definitely doable, I believe.
Let's just compare and contrast. What has Botswana done well, and what can Sri Lanka do better?
Yeah, I mean, we do have huge conflict in Botswana. That's probably our major issue with our elephant population, because again, we also have rapid development going on, habitat fragmentation. And I think that's actually why we linked up. And that's how we initially started chatting to one another, because we were both using the same mitigation tools, but in different continents, and then linked up that way. So I think it's been a really nice collaboration between the two of us and sharing that information and supporting each other and discussing what's worked and not worked in different areas. Above all, it does seem like educational campaigns are really, really impactful from what I've seen. A lot of our conflict is, yes, we have traditional agricultural conflict with elephants coming in and crop raiding, but also it's about human safety, a lot of it. So if you actually give people information on elephants, basic behavioral information, and empower them with that knowledge, it really helps in a huge way. So I think that's something, again, that we can both be doing in both countries or throughout the elephant range in the world.
Jehan, a little bit about what has been working, what other things you've tried, and where this elephant conflict is going in Sri Lanka?
Yeah, so I think if I break down your question into twofold, one is what can the government do and what they should be doing. So we've been working alongside, doing a lot of advocacy to see how we can push forward some policies. So it can be legal, it can be aspects of working with the community, which is a very, very important thing. If you don't get the community involved, because they are the ones that are seeing it day to day. So one of the things that have been advocated is village fencing and an agriculture fencing of electric fencing. So that's an aspect that the government now seems to be amenable to test and try it out. It's been done by the Organization for Conservation of Research, Dr. Prithviraj Fernando's organization. He's been trying it for the last 13, 14 years. He's been very successful. So the idea is to fence the village and not the jungle, in a layperson's terms, and let the elephant roam, and then you protect what you need to protect. Because the conflict is so intense, and as we discussed earlier, the landmass that elephants live in Sri Lanka are fairly high. What we feel as WNPS is that if the farmer or the villager can earn or gain something from the very animal that they think or want to kill, I think the perception of their minds would be changed. And we are testing something of this nature in a village in Ahatuava, where we have an employee of us living in the village. What we are trying to do is they have their only one water source. They have a lake, or in Sinhalese we call Vaver. So we've cleaned it up for them. We are using their labor, paying them to do it, and cleaned up the Vaver, the lake. Solar lighting for that village. They didn't have street lights, and the last villager got killed because she bumped into an elephant and didn't see the animal. In this village, what we are trying to do is trying to get them to, they are gaining these things because of the elephant. Their mind is now slowly changing. We have done a lot of education programs with them. We are helping their kids in that village. Whilst we can do it one-on-one, we can't do it as a national aspect because it will cost too much to handle that. But the other thing is to use tourism, but structured and tourism that can be managed well, where the farmers can be guides, because there's elephants, they don't have to be in the protected area. They're all over. If they can earn from that animal, they'll definitely not want to be killing it.
Absolutely. Dr. Tempe, so on a very practical sense, what are the things that have worked in Botswana? Are there villages where the elephants do roam in, but no harm is created either way, and then they roam out, where there's almost like a relationship with the elephants? Has that ever been achieved?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's always a work in progress, let's put it that way, because elephants are so intelligent, so they're always adapting, always changing. But I think one of the best mitigation tools that has ever been implemented is wildlife corridors, and really understanding where elephants are moving and then protecting those spaces, because where elephants are moving, other animals are also moving. So making sure that we keep those areas protected, don't keep developing on them. These could be areas, these corridors going through urban areas, they could be going through agricultural landscapes. But as long as you know where they are and they're demarcated in land use planning maps, which is what a number of different NGOs in Botswana have actually managed to implement, it allows the animals to pass by, gain the resources they need to, and then pass back into the protected areas. A lot of our conflict in Botswana is around water and actually access to water, because obviously farming is close to water sources and wildlife is close to water sources. So I think that's where we try and mitigate and manage. But that is the best long-term solution to keep those corridors open. We have seen incidences where they have been closed off, and that has increased conflict tenfold. So it's about understanding movements. And then again, educational campaigns, really, really trying to target that to the specific audience, find out where people are consuming their information in the village. Is it on the radio? Is it via social media? Is it on Facebook? Facebook is huge in our communities. And then really targeting campaigns specifically to those individuals in the language that they want to be speaking in and understanding it. And then also then focusing on the farmers themselves and coming up with tools and mitigations. No one tool ever really works, but if you use a combination of solar flashing lights, electrified lines and ropes, it can be really successful. Again, there's a number of NGOs in Botswana that have been trialing that and actually had really big success. So it's never one, as I said, it's never really one specific mitigation or strategy. It's actually the combination of them.
Talking about these corridors, in a Sri Lankan context, do the elephants move a lot, or do our water sources remain fairly stable?
So in a Sri Lankan context, compared to, say, an African elephant, our elephants probably travel less. So 30, 40, 50 kilometers might be average for them, or at a higher level, whereas in Africa, they may travel 200-300 kilometers. The bigger issue we have in Sri Lanka is most of what Tempe said, most of our corridors are being developed into habitats of human. And that's the reason today we have the problem. So planned development is not happening. The land use is not being looked at. I mean, there are no EIAs done. And development needs to happen. We are a developing country. Certainly, we're not against that, but it needs to be done in the right manner. So the issue is most of our corridors and elephant habitat areas have been blocked, and then the elephant also is not going to give up after a while. It's a big animal and it needs to eat, and once it gets used to eating human food like vegetation, or it's probably would thinking, why the hell should I eat grass when I can have this, which is much better and more nutritious. So once it gets used to having human food, it's very difficult to get it out of.
The corridors that our elephants or wildlife are using, has it pretty much been the same for hundreds of years, or has there been changes, or does it change rapidly?
These are corridors that elephants have been using, and because of them creating these corridors, other animals using. It's been there for a long time. It's just that people have been moved into areas without any EIAs or anything, and this is not that happened yesterday. We are talking 50, 60, 70 years of movements. Some villages that we work with, and part of what Spa Ceylon also is helping us to do is a light rebel system. They argue with me saying, we have been here 40 years. So I'm saying again, I agree, but they have been here 1,000 years. So, but that's the conflict. So they have been moved a couple of years back, or a few decades back, and now they see that it's their prescriptive right to be here. And, elephants are a problem for them. But the problem has been created by a human. Now it's become a human-elephant conflict.
Speaking of the light ripple system, I think, Doctor, you've been using something similar as well. A little more information on that.
The way I came upon it was actually just having conversations with farmers in the villages I was working in, and just asking them what worked and didn't work in their opinion over the years of farming in these regions. And farmers consistently said to me, if I flash my light on and off in quick succession, often that scares an elephant. It'll stop them from raiding their crop. Sometimes they wouldn't run away, but it would stop what they were doing. And I thought, geez, that's really interesting. That's an interesting concept. How can we actually work with that to try and create some kind of deterrent? So then I thought strobe lights. Let's look at strobe lights, because that's effectively what they're saying. So then I read up on different strobe technology, but basically effectively made what was was like a flashing light barrier along the side that elephants most commonly will approach a crop from. And I ran a scientific study with the NGO I was working with, Elephants Without Borders, and it proved to be incredibly successful at keeping elephants out of crop fields. It looks really bizarre. It looks like a bit of a disco at nighttime, but it certainly literally stops elephants in their tracks. So I published that paper, and then at the same time, Jehan reached out in WMPS and said, hey, we think we're doing the same similar thing. So let's chat about that and have a conversation. And it's been really fun to actually learn about the system that's being used here in Sri Lanka as well.
A bit more on that.
So our system, whilst it has a lot of similarities, we have some differences. One of them would be that we are only using white LED lights, whereas I think Tempe has different colors. The idea we had at that time was we felt that the elephant has some kind of color blindness, so we thought it doesn't make a difference. But the concept is the same. It's a strobe blinking light, and it's we set it up at an elephant's height in terms of its eyesight, and it works throughout the night, dusk to dawn. If a human is sleeping and they are suddenly woken up and a torch is flashed at their eyes, you get blinded for a second or so. I think it's a similar reaction, but probably much bigger. So I think it sees like a black wall or something in front of it,
right,
and then decides, I can't go this way, so let me go the other way. So with the 3 years that we've been working on it, collecting our data, and in the end we're looking at putting out a scientific document just like what Tempe has done, and we are using Tempe as one of our mentors for it. At the moment, have like a 82% efficacy of it. How we are gathering our data is we also have a control site that doesn't have the system. So when we call the farmer every day and ask these same 5 questions, we also ask what happened to the other side. Did they go in? We don't go to the owner of the other side because they'll be very angry with us.
Yeah.
So because they're like, why are you putting only there and not here? So we ask our farmer who has the site, has the LRS, did they go into the other property, and the same 5 questions for the other property. And so that's why how we are gathering our information. There are some people who feel that the elephant might get used to it because it's quite an intelligent animal. Individual who was invented it for us in Sri Lanka was Army Brigadier Sudattu Diyasena, and his soul rest in peace because he died actually of COVID. He felt that because it's a biological defect, we are mitigating conflict, and this is the first biological defect, at least that's what he felt. Because in Sri Lanka, all the mitigation methods are physical, whether it's an electric fence or whether it's firecrackers. We are confident that it's an option for the government to use in the future. We are managing 17 current live LRSs around the country.
Fantastic. I mean, we've been part of this project for a while now, and hopefully we can do a lot more of this and encourage maybe even more corporates to come on board, because if our governments tend to be a little slow, and maybe if 80% is a really, really good number, and if you can really move that forward, that'll be great. Speaking of elephants coming into villages, it's always around food or the pathway, right? So we are also having problems where other animals are being introduced into their areas, and that's causing a problem, right? Would you like to speak a little bit about that, Jehan?
Yeah, so I would say, Shalin, most of the elephants that do come into the villages are males, and they may come alone or they may have 2 or 3 with them. The females are very intelligent. They know if they have calves, and the first thing in Sri Lanka, I'm talking, if they see a torchlight, the next thing may be a gunshot, and they got used to it in Sri Lanka. So they're very, very versed to. So the females, 98% of the time, do not raid crops and come into villages. Okay. It's always the male. Talking about other animals, we do see issues of conservation aspects going wrong. So the elephant is the 5th highest crop raider. It's not the first.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, peacock is the largest. Peacock's main predator has been the jackal. Since the last 15 years, we have lost 50% of our jackal population. That's why you see even peacocks today in Colombo sometimes. Yeah. That's a big problem. Crop raiders are peacock, then you have the macaque, monkeys, the wild boar, and there's one more before the elephant becomes the 5th crop raider. Other than that, the peacock is probably the biggest problem that we see that has been created out of our situation. Humans also again have gone and made a problem. There are ways and means to work around them and live with them. I have met a farmer who says, my front part of the farm is for the elephant to eat.
Oh, okay.
And they grow banana for the elephant, and they have their manioc and other crop that they grow for themselves. What we call in Sinhalese Puranagama, they are like an older village.
Right.
So they tell me that they speak to the elephant, and the elephant turns around and goes.
Wow.
It's like in a certain voice. It's unique that the older villagers who have lived with elephants can manage that, while the more younger 30-40 year generations back are struggling to.
Doctor, do you see that in Botswana as well? Is there almost a dialogue that happens with elephants? that have passed down through generations, which is no longer happening?
I think we can learn a wealth of knowledge from the older generation that's been farming in these areas for a long time. I think it's a really important conversation to be having. And I think it is really important to understand your demographic of farmers that you're actually trying to talk to and what their history has been in that area, what their knowledge is of wildlife. A lot of people are going back to farming without so much experience on it. But I do think, again, you hear of these stories. That's where the whole light idea came from for me. It was just farmers consistently saying this. And then we built something bigger from that. So I think this knowledge is really, really important. I have had farmers say if they yell at elephants with a certain tone voice, they stop and walk away. So I think, there's definitely a lot to it. And that's why it is really important to have those relationships with the communities and really spend time understanding.
So elephants being intelligent, elephants having long-term memory, is that a real thing? And can we leverage that more?
Absolutely. I mean, their memories are absolutely vast and I think always just so impressive. You think about how the leader of a herd knows where water is and resources are at different times of the year with different seasons through prolonged droughts. I mean, they have that all mapped in their head. It's extraordinary. And that's where a lot of this conflict's coming from with this rapid development, because they're going through paths that multiple generations of their family have gone down. And suddenly they're getting these roads in the way and buildings in the way. And that's obviously really rapidly happening more and more. So I think their intelligence, they have the capacity to adapt and habituate. So I think, our issues are not always trying to get elephants to change their behavior. They seem more willing. A lot of the work I've been doing is actually looking at how they're adapting and how their movements are changing based on the differing human developments. So that part's fine. It's the human side that we need to try and learn and adapt ourselves and have that little bit more flexibility as much as they're giving us.
Jehan, this morning we heard an elephant was shot here in Sri Lanka just before we started this. Elephant poaching, and I mean, not in a case of a conflict happening or people really going after elephants. How big is it? Do we have, both in Botswana and Sri Lanka, do we have the laws to protect elephants? Are we doing enough on that end? I'll let you start, Jehan.
I would say Sri Lanka doesn't have an elephant poaching issue because, for one, genetics of our elephant has helped that. The fact that we only have 7% of our males that have 7% of our males have tusks. Yeah. I think if I got my numbers right, in the last 10 years, we may have killed about 70 tuskers. And of those tuskers, only 3 had lost their tusks.
Okay.
So someone had, realized that they are killed, or they killed the tusker for the tusks.
Right.
So that's a kind of a relief that and thanks to a few British planters who annihilated our tuskers in long years ago, that our gene pool is so small that we don't have tuskers. So that's, from that point of view, we don't have a poaching issue. Our issue is conflict and the farmer shooting it because they don't want it raiding their crop. We have the laws, but how it's implemented and how it's pushed through and managed is the problem. We have strong laws. We have Fauna and Flora Protection Ordinance that actually WNP has helped draft. And that's a legal Bible for wildlife in Sri Lanka. It's a jailable offense because it's a public property, the elephant. It's an administrative nightmare for the Department of Wildlife. They don't have probably a decent enough team everywhere in the country. And the second thing is the elephant may not die immediately. So it might go somewhere else and die. Then there's no way to know who shot the elephant. I mean, unless you get people sneaking and telling info. The implementation of the laws is our problem. We have NGOs and, even including us, that intervene in court cases so that the court case doesn't get swept under the rug. Right. And we have some results and some success in that. But we are also pushing government to, prosecute better. So the biggest problem is you have an elephant and you caught the man. It's in a remote location. It's the warden or the assistant warden of that location that will go to court.
Right.
And now that gentleman, or in Sri Lanka it's all men, so I'm sorry, but in that case, that gentleman is not trained to argue against a lawyer. The man is only the person who does the job. It's a bigger aspect. So that's where implementation is our problem. Our laws are there, but we're not implementing.
How about Botswana?
Yes, poaching of any elephants is completely illegal in Botswana throughout Africa. And there is sadly a huge amount of poaching still occurring. Obviously, unlike the Sri Lankan elephants, our elephants in Africa, both male and female, have tusks. So it doubles the amount in the population. And there is quite an age statistic, but the estimate was over 80 elephants are being poached a day. across the continent. And I think it's actually probably an underestimate. And that was a stat that came up over 18 years ago now. So it is rampant. The demand for the illegal ivory trade is still very much there. And a lot of these are very, very highly organized syndicates. But again, same sort of thing. It's very hard to prosecute. It's very hard to find the people in the first place. But the prosecution process is incredibly slow when we do actually catch them, if we manage to catch them. I think what's really important is Botswana's elephants are also Zimbabwe's elephants. They're also Zambia's elephants. Our elephants can freely move between a lot of our countries, the same in East Africa or same in Central and West Africa. So we do have a lot of transboundary movements. So as soon as you bring in different international laws, it's hard to prosecute if poachers are running over a border, international border. So we literally have issues along those lines as to how to curb and reduce that. There are obviously strong anti-poaching measures that need to be implemented and put in place to try and help really curb that. That is a big, very important part of what's required. But I think the actual, once you find them or trying to find them, is probably definitely the most difficult challenge that we have in Africa.
Okay, I'm going to ask you both a question that might get us all in trouble. But let's do this. Elephants are used across Asia and across the world, really, in different religious festivals. What are your thoughts on that, number one? Is there a positive to it where it creates some level of reverence for the elephant that later helps human-elephant conflict and so on? Or is it just out of line and we need to stop it and it's cruel on the animal? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, that's something where we don't have that at all in Africa. There isn't that sort of association and connotation, which is in itself really interesting that we've never struggled with that. I do know even elephant back riding. So people will do safaris on elephants in Africa. I know that's happening. That does happen throughout Asia. That is slowly being, that industry is ending. Botswana banned it a number of years ago, and there's a lot of pressure on other countries to end it. That came about from obviously just our science is improving. So we're starting to really understand more what the elephant psyche is going through. And a lot of that was driven by doing stress analyses to work out their stress levels when they were being ridden and not ridden. And it was very, very clear actually when they had that close association with people. Even elephants that have been doing it their whole lives, they were highly stressed. So that was driven by data as to why we had that ban. On the religious side, I'm going to leave it to Jehan because I honestly can't speak to it too much, but I just know that the level of interaction from our side was incredibly stressful for the animals, and that's why that call's being made.
The fact is that I think it's more of a heritage aspect. As a Sri Lankan, using elephants in our kingdom times, a lot of elephants were used to do work, to fight battles and all that. Sri Lanka, fortunately, and I'm comparing Asian countries, our captive elephants are less than 200 in the country, whereas if you take Thailand, the wild and the captive about the same number in the regions of 3,000. We do have elephants that are used for what we call peraharas in our country, and the largest being the Candy perahara, which I think they use in the range of between 100 to 130 elephants. Yes, it's something you can't just stop overnight, and it's difficult. And I think a disaster is waiting to happen. So that might, in the end, stop elephants being used in a perahara. I'm really sorry to say this, but it's already coming. Because we have had every perahara we have had in the last 2 years, there have been an issue where an elephant has run amok, as they call it in papers. But I'm not saying we should move away from it, but it should be gradually reduced to some extent. Now in India, they're using a robot elephant for one of their religious festivals. Whether we can go in that direction, I don't know. I don't see that. But there is no reason to try and tame more elephants to become perahara elephants. We have enough that are within the captive elephant numbers to maybe use the elephants. The way that they are being looked after wherever they are being kept needs to be really looked at and, managed better. Predominantly, most of them are in Pinnawala orphanage. Then there are some private owners that have elephants.
And Dr. Tempe was talking about the stress tests, and that actually show that they are going through something. Have we done anything similar in Sri Lanka?
Not that I know of.
Okay.
But there are enough signs that scientists tell us these elephants are at a boiling point, right? And in one of the clear indication is it keeps moving its head up and down, sideways. It doesn't stay in one place. So that's a clear indication that you're having a ticking time bomb. Again, as it's a Sri Lankan heritage, it does bring tourism to an extent. I'm not condoning it, but all I'm saying is we are living very dangerously at the moment with having elephants in our peraharas. And if we can figure out a different way of doing it before a disaster happens, it would be better.
Thank you to both of you. Just moving forward from here, something for all our viewers to understand. The average person, we're not living in a border village. We're not interacting with elephants on even a regular basis. What can the average human being do towards elephant conservation? Because from a scientist point of view, we've seen big animals across time disappear. It's been, a constant across hundreds and thousands of years. Could the elephant be one of those big animals that we'll see disappear? In that sense, what is our responsibility as the average human being, not as doctors, not as scientists, not as wildlife people, as average human beings, to help in conserving, sustaining this animal?
Well, sadly, it's a great question. Sadly, yes, we're definitely on the cusp where we are going to start to look at the extinction of these animals. That is the reality of the situation at the rate of loss in a lot of different countries. As we said, we're having huge issues throughout Africa and throughout Asia. And it could happen in this lifetime, And I think the biggest thing and what we can have and what we do have is access to information nowadays. So I really just encourage people to follow the work of NGOs and societies like WMPS. Really try and make yourself informed. I think a lot of us are running away because we don't want to hear bad news. But I think the more information you have and you're getting it from credible sources like the people working on the ground is really, really important. And support them. Even if you can't financially support them, go to the parades, go to the lectures, go and actually just get it more involved, because then you can share that wisdom. And then as a community, we can actually start supporting one another. But I think everyone has access to information nowadays. So I really do encourage people to consume that and spread the word.
Very recently, we had someone very publicly say that we have an overpopulation of elephants and we should ship them out. Can you also address that as you answer this?
My answer would be twofold. One is globally, yes, and there's no other better person to say what you said about the numbers and the decline. My simple answer is it's supply and demand. So if you reduce the demand of ivory, you're going to reduce the supply. If people stop using aspects of ivory in their day-to-day life, stop the supply. From a Sri Lankan point of view, so the last census was done, and quite ironically, the country is going to do another census in a few days. The last one was done in 2011. They claimed that there was 5,800 odd elephants, give or take, say 20%, say there was 6,500 elephants. Since 2012, we have killed 3,012 elephants, right? And as scientists like Tempe would say, it takes 18 to 22 months for a gestation period for an elephant. So on top of that, so if you kill half of it, and then on top of that, for them to have birth another elephant calves. So on top of that, in main national parks like Yala, we are losing 52% of our calves within the age of 2, mainly because of habitat loss and not having enough food source. Those are main parks that have elephants, Yala, Udawale. The science work was done in Yala. So my thoughts are that yes, our population is declining, and at the rate we are killing more than an elephant a day or dying an elephant a day, I see that our numbers are declining. We do have people who come into politics that become subject ministers of different subjects, and then they suddenly become experts in it. And I don't see how we could even dream of exporting elephants out of our country because we have too much. They think we have too much. The conflict has increased because the landmass of elephants and humans living together has increased, and that's creating the problem. Certainly, I don't agree with that statement that we should be exporting elephants because we have too many of them. Certainly not. I think it's the other way.
Thank you. So thank you to both of you for joining us today. Lots of interesting facts about elephants, lots of heartbreaking facts as well in terms of that we might lose these majestic animals in our lifetime. I think we all have a role to play in terms of education is the big thing that came out of here. We need to educate the villagers that are constantly interacting with elephants. We need to educate the everyday people so that they can bring attention towards it in terms of the way they consume, bring attention towards it in ways of funding this. Governments alone, particularly in not so affluent nations like ours, are going to need corporates to come forward, help out the everyday people to come forward and help out. And I think education and spreading this far and wide, this message that, hey, we might lose the last of the big ones, is something that we should really, really, each and every one of us take to heart and even get word about elephant out there. So this is why Spa Ceylon has been very involved in the conservation efforts as well. Every country we're in, we take our products that have the elephant on it. We've turned it into design. We've turned it into something you can keep at home, like some of the stuff you see here, because we want to keep reminding people of this majestic animal. We want people to be involved in helping funding amazing projects like you both are doing and your organizations are doing, and just keep it top of mind. And I like to call on other corporates in Sri Lanka, other brands throughout the world. Let's do this together because they are a beautiful animal. They're such a unique animal as well. Even if it means incorporating them into beautiful branding work we do and so on, it's a really nice way of very softly taking that elephant into the lives of everyday people, teaching our kids about it, storybooks. I mean, the younger generation are definitely a great place to start. That day at the walk, we had some of the kids from a border village come and do a play about interaction with elephants, which really touched the hearts of so many people. If we can all get together and take this education out there seriously, and we as non-experts can get involved as well, I think that'll play a vital role. So thank you so much on behalf of Sri Lanka, Botswana, the world, for the work you guys are doing and preserving these animals for as long as we can. And thank you for joining us today.
Oh, our pleasure. Thank you so much for giving us the opportunity.
Shalin, thank you very much. And thank you for organizations like Spa Ceylon coming forward to, help the cause and appreciate it. There's not many in the country, but you're one of them. Thank you.
Thank you.